I haven't heard from him, and he's not online. So we can go from there. Um, yeah, so there's a few things I guess on my list. So maybe the first thing we can do is just like go around. We can figure out what is on people's lists for regrouping in the new year, and then we'll go from there. So the things that I wanted to talk about. So Bain, we just merged a pull request of his into Discretize, and it includes a bunch of VTK updates.
Yeah.
Just super awesome. You should check it out. The release notes are in Slack, and he's actually got some images and GIFs and things like that that show how it operates. And so it's actually like he's able to set up like small interactive VTK windows that you can play with, which is really, really exciting. And the next step they're looking at, and hopefully this is something I can try and help on, is getting that actually running inside the notebook. So, because right now you can run it sort of beside it, but it'd be awesome if it was inside. But anyways, it's a huge step forward. Check it out. If you have an example of an inversion that you would like to see in 3D, Bain was looking for an example where we've got sort of multiple iterations, all sitting on the same mesh that he could demonstrate, because he's put a lot of effort into showing sort of multiple data sets, which would just be multiple iterations of an inversion on the same mesh, and having that be something that you can easily scroll through and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have an example, just send it through on the Discretize channel on Slack and ping Bain and see if we can try and get like a few more of these examples up and running. Because the more examples that we have, the easier it is for all of us to use all this.
Right. Yeah, so Dom's recent stuff would be great for that.
Yeah. So we can encourage him. And Sagi, if you were nodding, so if you've got an example, that'd be awesome.
So the example means a model and like basically a model and mesh. Is that the example, or actually like example means that running the inversion and outputs the multiple iterations of the model?
Well, I mean, sure, we can do a single model and a single mesh, but ideally, if we have multiple iterations, if you've saved multiple iterations, like over the course of the inversion, that would be an example that we currently do not have. That would be nice to include.
Right. So that includes actually running the inversion and saving it.
Yeah.
And it's for all class of mesh, like tensor mesh and octree mesh, right?
Yeah. I believe so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the octree is up and running. I know for sure the tensor is. The cylindrical is not, but both, anything that's Cartesian coordinates, it should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there's a couple other things I'd like to chat through with respect to, well, I was going to ask Dom to present on the pull request that Thibaut, you've been involved in this as well.
Yeah, I started it, but after that, Dom bring in a lot of his own stuff, so I don't know what happened after that. Like I still need to do my review on that. It's on a fairly high priority for me to do that quickly.
Okay. Yeah, because I had a brief look through it and have a few questions and things like that, because there's a lot changing. And so I think it'd be helpful to actually get, if Dom could actually first do a pass and like point out the things that have changed, because there's a lot that like was perhaps style changes or name changes or like changes in the order of things, but not actually changes in functionality. And so yeah, if he's able to do like just a first pass sort of explaining what changed, that would be helpful. Then I have a pull request on that actually I would appreciate a review on. I can send that through later. That's on some updates to the DC fields object, or just to get electric field data. So I'll send that through on Slack. That's not something we need to discuss.
Is it already open? I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, it's been open for a while.
Okay.
It's pull request number 724.
Yeah, I think I can take a look. Yeah.
Okay, that would be awesome. I would appreciate that. Cool. Okay, then there's sort of two other things that I'd like to table, and then we'll get everybody else's notes, and then we can discuss these things in more detail, because I think these are more involved conversations. First of all, I've been working a bit on trying to hit on discretize a bit with respect to the documentation. So getting that cleaned up and a little easier to navigate, because right now it's kind of all over the place, which is also, I mean, the SimPEG documentation is also all over the place, but discretize is a little more contained. So I think it's a nice place to start and get all this figured out. I'm basing a lot of it on Leo's work in Verde. I can send you the link because he has beautiful docs. It's really nicely set up. And so I think that that is the direction that we should try and go.
Lindsey, who did you say it was based on?
Leo Ueda's work on Verde. So it's related to the Fadiando. It's all in the Fadiando package.
Okay.
Fadiando ecosystem, I guess. Let me send this through just on the meetings Slack. So whenever you have a moment, take a look and see what you think. I think it's beautiful, and I think that that's what we should strive for. So check it out.
The NumPy doc style?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so there's a couple things going on there. The NumPy doc style, also just, I mean, the layout and the organization of the docs. What we had before is like the API is just sort of like strewn throughout the documentation, which is not helpful. So I think that we need to separate and first have like user documentation, which actually does not discuss the API like in detail. It first off just shows you this is how you set up each of the mesh types, those kinds of things. Then go in and actually have separate documentation on the API so that if you need more details on like exactly what mesh tensor does as a utility, you can find that. So I think we need like those two things to be separate. This is how you use the code. Here's the detailed documentation. So my goal in the next couple of weeks with that is to try and get a very first pass and start getting like a little bit of a template in place, and then request help from everyone to sort of get this a bit more in shape and a bit more usable. Because I think especially with people like Sarah, and it's Vahid? Doug? Vahid? Yeah.
I think it's Vahid, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, with people coming and new people using SimPEG and discretize, we need to get the documentation in shape. And so too, like anytime you're asked a question, if you can try and make a habit of trying to find it in the docs, and if you can't, make an issue or like add it to the docs, in the long run, that's going to save us a bajillion emails. I realize in the short run, it's like a few more steps on you, but if you can just try and make a habit of that, I think we will all be better for it. Okay, that also brings me into a point about code style. So I had a really great chat with Leo at HU and was looking through Verde and just getting some tips on how he's doing things. And one of the packages that I think that we should start applying is called Black. And it just formats your code. It's opinionated on how it does that. So, and like does all the spacing and bracketing and all of that sort of stuff in a very standardized way so that I don't have to try and bug you to do that. And it also, the way it's designed is to actually try and give you the smallest number of lines in a diff. So what that means is that if Thibaut goes in and changes some code and makes a pull request, if he first runs Black on it, Black has been designed to try and like be smart about how many lines of code have changed. So me as a reviewer, it's easier because the changes are a little more targeted, because that's one thing that I'm really struggling with the current potential fields pull request, is it's really challenging to see what are like formatting and style changes versus what is actually a functionality change. So I started an issue on this in both SimPEG and in discretize. So you can have a look at the link for Black and see if you guys think this is a reasonable way to go. And if so, then we can start trying to enforce that on the code.
Is that like a Sublime package?
No, it's a Python package.
Okay.
So it's not like a plugin. What you do is just before you submit a pull request, so you make all your changes, save them all, commit them, and then you just run like I'll update the make file, and then you can just run make format, and then it'll just go through, look at the entire code base, format it all, and then you can just commit that.
Yeah, because I do admit like some of the on the potential field one, like some of the format change might be because of me. The reason is that like some of the code that have not been touched in a while were not like following pepate. But in my Sublime now, I have this package that I installed a long time ago. I sent it on Slack when I start using it. But basically, it's an auto format. So anytime I save a file, it does the pepate automatically for me. But that means that if I change a line of code, but the full file is like was written before we followed the pepate requirement, it means that it's gonna change the whole file to follow.
Yeah, and so this would do that consistently through the entire code base, so that like if your pep8 formatter is slightly different than Mike's, then Black is just opinionated and will say this is the way things are, and we'll go with that. So I think that like in a lot of ways, I think that can simplify our life a bit. Yeah, so we can think on it. We don't need to act on it like today, but I think let's give it some thought. Cool. Is there anything else on the SimPEG and/or discretize front that people want to talk about right now?
We might just mention like the few pull requests that have been merged during the holiday season. Just because I think we had a few. Like there was like we had some improvement for the plot to the data that Lindsey and I worked on. We fixed a bug in the data misfit class that was always setting the standard deviation to 5%. And yeah, we got the VTK one this morning. And did we get any other PR in? Not sure.
Those, I believe, are the biggest ones. Yeah. Thanks, Thibault. No, that's awesome. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts?
I might jump in. Like, so I'm sorry, I don't have any report for that. Like, so right after my red eye flight to Montreal, I went straight from the airport to Polytechnique Montreal. And went to see my former geophysics group there. Like I saw a few familiar faces and a few ones that I didn't know. So like it was the end of the semester. So there were like 6 people. There were my former master supervisor, Michel Chouteau, and the new geophysics professor there. And he's also mostly a seismic guy, but he had to teach EM this semester, and he knew already about EM GeoSci. So that's cool.
Nice.
We actually he had few questions on the app because he used the website, but he was not sure about how to use the apps for the class or like some of the things. So that was actually nice to discover that he was already using that not for like a full class, but like as a base to start.
That's
it was less a presentation than a discussion, but we talked for a while, so I guess there were definitely some like high interest for like EM GeoSci or SimPEG, etc. And I think the main point I will get out of that is that I think we should definitely go forward with that SimPEG workshop in May. We've been discussing lately, and I think that will be like a great place for many people that like that are like just on the edge to start, but don't find like a an opportunity or time for that to jump in. I can think of like, yeah, some student, or I can even think of like Nick Williams that wants to try SimPEG but don't have the time in his like work day. But if he has a proper workshop, he can probably ask Barik to get a few days to participate, and that will give him the the jump start for that.
That's a great point.
But I also think that if we plan for that in May, well, it would be nice if we can give at least 1 or 2 months in advance a date to everybody to get organized.
Yeah. I'm almost wondering if May is like potentially a bit too soon, even. Yeah. I don't know, but let's. I agree that we should potentially start prioritizing that and getting, well, because that'll get us to get material in order, and really onboard a few people, which I think is, I agree, that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, and also probably need to think about what do we want to do.
Yeah.
Like, is that for a developers meeting, or are we inviting like kind of more users? And it depends upon what we want to do. Yeah, I think we need to organize it differently.
Yeah, I guess like as a first pass, I could sort of see us trying to do both in some ways, is basically have like 2 days of developer meeting and then 2 days of workshop or something like that. Because I mean, if we're all in the same place, if we're all able to get there at the same time, it would be good to take advantage of that. Okay. That's sort of, well, the apps and the use of GeoSci, that sort of is one other thing that I would like to bring up and discuss. Because I know, so Jaja and Dequan are both interested in using some of the apps for their courses. And then, of course, it'll probably continue in 350. We had talked, so the thing that we were running into in the past, and we talked about this when Dequan was in Vancouver, is that like there's so much overlap between some of the EM apps and some of the GPG labs, and there's like code that's existing in both places, and like trying to consolidate all of that. So over the holidays, I tried to give some thought to how we might like maintain these, but then also have like so the idea of consolidating is nice because then we have like only really one-ish repository to maintain, and we can always make sure that it's functioning and like sort of all work in one place, which I think is a good thing. What's challenging about that is that like Jaja's got a course that has a different scope than 350, than Dequan's course. And so each of those are probably not going to be using all of the apps. And if we give students all like something like 30 apps, like that's just, it's too much. So I sent around, I don't know if anybody had a chance to have a look at the link that I sent in the email. But there's 2 repositories that I've started just on my private, or like on my GitHub account right now, because I wanted to sort of sketch this out before we move it over to GeoSci and like actually see if we all think this is reasonable. But there's like, if you want right access to it right now, I'm happy to give that to you. So I'm just going to post this in the meetings. So I'll talk you just through a little bit of my thought process here. So we know that we want to have the notebooks all in one place. Originally, with sort of like the EM examples and EM apps, we had separated the code from the notebooks, which I think caused more headaches than what it was worth, in the sense that we often ended up in like the chicken egg scenario where you need to merge one before the other one works, and vice versa, which is annoying. And so I think that we should just have them all in the same place, and that will remove that headache. And then we can still distribute the code separately on PyPI, and like that's not a problem. So when somebody pip installs, they're not pip installing like a bunch of notebooks as well. So the first thing that I did is try to consolidate all of the code and notebooks into that repository called GeoSci Labs. So the way, I'm just going to share my screen, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is what the repository looks like. So it's a combination of EM apps, EM examples, and GPG labs. So the way that it's organized right now is GeoSci Labs, all lowercase, all one word. This is where all the code lives. And the code is organized by method. So I've got DCIP, EM, GPR, inversion, meg, and seismic. And so that's just where all the code is. And then there's a base code as well. Then all of the notebooks are organized in the exact same way, with the addition of an index notebook. So that gives us like a giant library of notebooks. I think we can do some good things with documentation and all of that here. We can get there. It's not there right now. And then what I've tried to do is then think about, okay, so in 350 or something like that, we're only going to want a subset of notebooks. And so the idea that I'm trying to sketch out is this GeoSci course repository. So I've written a README of like how I envision this functioning. You'll see there's a big note at the top that says like none of this is actually real yet. It's just a thought dump. Because I do sometimes find it helpful to like walk through what the documentation should be and like what the use cases should be before writing anything. So the idea of GeoSci Labs is it's basically a repository that you as an instructor would fork, and then there would just be a file called like notebooks.yaml or something like that, that you would specify which notebooks that you want installed. Sorry, we're getting a ton of feedback. Oh, that's from Soggy. Sorry, so you would basically, you'd fork this repository so that you have your own copy. You would clone it, install. So the install step would just download and install all of the code that you need. That won't install any notebooks yet or download any notebooks. Then I would see this repository having a notebook.yaml file, and this would be a structured file where you can basically specify which notebooks you want from GeoSci Labs, if you want to rename any of them potentially, and if you want to put them in a different folder. That's sort of all I see that doing. And then running something like make setup looks at notebooks.yaml and downloads all the notebooks that you want. And then you can sort of version control and maintain that on your own. Then the other thing is you want to basically keep things up to date. So the way that I would envision that happening is, so say Devin discovers a bug in one of the notebooks or an explanation that could be better and wants to update that. If you want that to feed back into the ecosystem, you make that update on GeoSci Labs, and then you re-download that notebook to your course repository and then push it from there. So all of the changes should be happening on GeoSci Labs. GeoSci course, it just lets you basically maintain a subset of the notebooks. And then too, if you wanted to grab something completely different for your course, you should be able to include that, and like we wouldn't touch that. Does that like roughly make sense?
That does. That looks like a huge step forward, Lindsey, as far as kind of simplifying things and kind of organizing so that you've got the right stuff in the right place.
Yeah, so I think my the things that I was trying to think about from like the instructor point of view is basically keeping keeping like the required knowledge of Git to a minimum. Like you'll need to know enough to commit and push, but hopefully no more. Because there's other fancy solutions that we could come up with, but I don't want to do that. Yeah, but then the challenge will come is, say, Devin, like, so then it doesn't let you necessarily do too many things that are specific to your course. Like one of the things that with this that I would request is that, for example, some of the GPR notebooks are called like GPR TBL4. Which is extremely specific to 350. And so we would have to go in and reword some of those things. I think it's fine to still reference articles. I think it's fine to like still reference specific scenarios. But then we sort of need to pull out how much course-specific stuff is in the notebooks. Which I don't think there is much, but there's a little bit.
So in that, are you just talking about titles or something in that, or is there more things that are going on?
That's something I need to get a better handle on, and Devin, you might be able to speak to that a bit more because you were more heavily involved in using them last year. Yeah, I think they're reasonably general. There might just be like a little bit of language here and there that needs to be adjusted, which shouldn't be too big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm thinking of, that exercise was made directly for the TBLs and for the labs. And then it was given a name because we wanted to name all of those apps for the 350 in order so that they would be organized, sort of chronological order of use.
Yeah.
But the name could be changed so that it just is completely generic to what the functionality of that app is. And
yeah, and then I think like one of the things that I would like to try and support, and this might not happen in the first pass, but is like to allow you to rename the notebooks so that if you want to call it TBL4 for your course, that's fine, but it won't affect anything in GeoSci Labs. So we sort of think of like GeoSci Labs as a library, and then GeoSci course is like your way of checking out notebooks from the library for your course.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think like as for first try, like having that on like in different university, etc. Like have I can imagine like Jaja or Dikwan or other professor will like to personalize and tailor the notebook to their need.
Yeah.
But we need to have like the same base. Like the code is the code they are based on is not changing.
Yeah.
Like you have like a common base, but after that the instructor can put a different flavor to their notebook for their to match their instructor need and style.
Yeah, yeah.
So then, I guess one thing I'm wondering is, so we have this thing, and then we have a way for some professor to locally make a custom version, or basically, yeah, they would download the code, and then they would have their custom list of apps. From that point, I guess I want to know how you suggest they are then making that accessible to the students. Are they going to, because the whole idea was for them not to have to clone the entire repository?
Right. So the thing that that GeoSci courses fills is it lets you build your own small repository.
Yeah.
With all the requirements and everything specified.
Yeah.
So so it would be like for 350 the way that we deployed GPG Labs basically. Is like all that we have is sort of a requirements file or an environment.yaml and then the notebooks. And so that's all that this repository should really have in terms of functionality.
Right. So so then they end up with they end up with a repository that has everything that you would need to do to deploy to like an online Python platform and run everything. just like they would do with Azure, or that's kind of where you're thinking they're going to give the access to the students.
Yeah, exactly. So like I think the output of a GeoSci courses fork should then be a repository that can be immediately deployed to Binder with like no overhead.
Yeah, I was just wondering about how that was the plan for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because if we can get it to Binder with no overhead, then like somebody should be able to install it on the UBC Jupyter Hub or on Azure notebooks or whatever they want to do.
So let's suppose Jaja downloads something and then decides to change the app, adds a bit of extra functionality. Is there going to be a question about whether that's actually like a different app with a different name and then kind of reload it? Or if it, like, at what point do we just decide whether we're going to accept those changes? Or how does that whole back process work?
I guess I see that happening on like a case-by-case basis, really. Because it totally depends on like what is added. So is Jaja adding something to the code that's like a completely new widget? Then in which case, like, where does it fit? Yeah, I don't see sort of a general solution to that, I guess.
It's creating a directory on somebody's computer. When somebody makes their own sort of custom collections of this app, that's not getting tracked by GitHub, is it?
It should be. So what I've included in the, like, it's their responsibility to at that point.
Oh yeah, and that's fine. I'm thinking that, so we've got, let's say this whole thing takes off, and we've got 40 professors that have decided to go in and do this.
Yeah.
Does that mean we then have 40 branches off of master that are created, or is it that they're making their own repository?
They're making their own repository.
Okay, so yeah, it'll be, yeah, okay, they're making their own.
Yeah, yeah. So they fork it, which makes their own repository. And then it's up to them if they want to maintain it on GitHub or if they just want to like maintain it on Dropbox or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll give them all the tools that they need to maintain it on GitHub with the hope that people do that. Because it, I think, causes less headaches in the long run for everyone. But yeah, it's up to them at that point. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess like my biggest request at this point is that if people could read through the README that's on the GeoSci courses repository and make issues if there's things that you think don't make sense or if there's questions that you have. Because I think the more that we can flesh out before a single line of code is written, the better. Yeah. So yeah, so if this sounds reasonable, I'd like to maybe like, let's think on this for a few days, and then if everyone here thinks that it makes sense, then we'll propose this to Jaja and to Dequan, because they're really our first use case. And if they also think that this makes sense, then we can actually start writing code.
I guess the other person that might be included is Alan, right?
I agree, but I think that first we should flesh it out with Jaja and Dequan because they've already been using it. So like getting them, like, I guess getting the first state of this thing explained to and being used by somebody else will help us then actually get it to a state where we can explain it to Alan, because I don't believe that he's been using the apps much yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, I thought he had been using the apps, but maybe not.
He might have been, but not in a high enough, like, or not enough that he's requested anything from us or requested changes or anything like that. So.
Oh, okay. So his changes then have just been basically typos then in the GPG or certain things like that? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. The other thing that sort of like came up with that is that I tried to sort of beat some of the code from the apps into shape a little bit more. So I am actually running Black and Flake 8 on those. Flake 8 does like a light touch Pep 8. There's a few things that I'm gonna make some issues and things like that that'll help perhaps reduce complexity. Because one of the nice things that Flake 8 checks for is complexity of the code. And so it's just going and looking through at like how many crazy nested loops do you have, how many like if else statements, and how much code repetition and all of that do you have. For the GeoSci labs, in order to get it to pass, I set it to like basically the code can almost be infinitely complex because our code, some of it is really, really complicated. So I'll create issues that point out which functions are sort of, you know, the worst offenders. And as we have time, we can go in and just sort of refactor a bit of that. I don't think it's super urgent, but down the road, if like Dequan wanted to go in and fix something and the complexity is just huge, that makes it really hard for him to go and do a one-liner fix. So this will, I think, help keep us in check with how much technical debt we build up. So.
Yeah, one of the complex one like that I can think of is, for example, all the DC, because we have so many possible combination in the ocean, like between, we have all the different field or like potential electric current, we have linear and load scale, we have primary, secondary, total, etc. And we wanted it to work in any of those case and combinations. So we have tons of if statement on basically just on how to format the color bar sometimes.
Yeah. And so like some of that stuff is probably unavoidable, but there's some that I think that like it's just good that we be aware of, and we can do what we can to reduce it. So yeah.
Cool.
Other things that you all would like to go over?
I think
Any of us have any pull requests that are pending that need to be done?
I think your VRM examples is like ready to go, so I can take a look at that this afternoon, and we can try and get that in. Yeah, but then other than that,
Comments is just probably out of date with master branch, but I can't remember if it passes.
okay, it looks like it does. So we can take a quick look.
yeah, and I will like later this week I will jump again in that PF pull request to like see, like we can like make like iteration between Dom, you, and me, and I think that it seems it's a pretty big one.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Is there any plan for like that simulation class to be, I don't know, like even initiated? I think you've initiated, but at some point stopped. Do you have some sort of like a timeline or plan?
I think so. I want to get the discretize docs in order, and I want to get some of this underlying like formatty stuff just in a bit of better shape with SimPEG. And then, yeah, I agree that the simulation, we need to get on that pretty quickly. I don't have a timeline estimate for you, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, this is my first week, and I actually got quite a bit of stuff from Rosemary.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of things are like really technical things. Yeah, a lot of 3D simulations and like, yeah. So, yeah, I actually got quite a bit of motivation to develop the code base and actually test with the Aarhus codes and
Nice.
yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, I cannot tell all of the things. Like I said, a lot of things going on here, but yeah, there are a lot of cool things happening, and yeah, they're really into the methodology itself and develop right and apply. At the moment, they got two or three pilot sites, but if they can show like this is actually a working solution, they got a much bigger plan. They want to apply for the full airborne EM to the full Central Valley area.
Nice.
But like the time limit is 2 years, so Rosemary is really in pressure to get it done right now. Anyway, so yeah, so like actually I'm gonna do a lot of technical work here.
Yeah.
Developing the code, and one of the interesting thing, I had a meeting with the computational guy, like a computer guy here at Stanford. They got a really big computing machine. So like at the moment I got just 3 nodes. But yeah, if I want, yeah, they can set it up the Jupyter Hub, or like I can get like pretty big computing machine here. So
Nice.
yeah, and then this guy is actually really experienced. So he got a couple of Jupyter Hubs that he's running in this department. Yeah, and then he seems like knows pretty well about how things are working for the computing. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to actually learn.
Excellent.
From him. So yeah, yeah, not sure. Like things are pretty abstract at the moment, but I'll update as things are going. So the reason why I asked the simulation class, because I think the main interest is this 3D EM code for simulation.
Yeah.
So I want to actually get that 3D time domain EM code really works.
Yeah.
Well, it works at the moment, but kind of like make it more efficient and test with a bit more like commercial codes and stuff. That's what I need to do here. So, I mean, that there could be a lot of synergy with SimPEG development.
That's awesome, Sagi. Well, yeah. Well, then in that case, we can prioritize that. What I think is nice about, in some ways, starting with the documentation, because the thing that's happening with SimPEG and that like we need to rein in is the API and like our naming conventions and all of this sort of stuff are starting. They're all over the place.
Right.
We like at the base, it's still not bad, but a lot of the stuff sort of has gone off and done its own thing. Same thing with like, just in some cases, like properties and stuff that are being attached to given classes, and like why we had that data misfit bug is just because there's too many places where we're defining standard deviation and it's not clear that they're all hooked up. So we need to tear some of those things apart. And I think it's really helpful to like sketch out the documentation to figure out how to actually organize all of that.
Okay.
And then, so we basically like write how the simulation class should function before we write a single line of code.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So not at the moment, I'm not 100% sure how I can help for that discretized documentation. So if you can start like pointing things out where to look, and then I can definitely help.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
What else?
Yeah. For the documentation too, it sounded like Sarah might be interested to help on that side.
That's great.
Oh, that's what I understood from the Slack conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, Sarah.
Oh, Gar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm also responsible
Yeah.
for that over the summer, so I'm also going to be heavily involved in SimPEG documentation.
Yeah, so hopefully like in the next couple of weeks we can get the skeleton in much better shape, so that it's very clear like where you can add documentation, because right now it's not even clear.
Yeah. One thing I want to investigate is if there's a better way that the APIs, a better way that those RSTs, I think they're auto-generated. They look in the .py files, they find out the different methods, the different classes, and then they find the properties and the attributes, and then they sort of generate what all those things are. And I would like to maybe investigate a way of either making it a bit more stable if your syntax isn't perfect, or some other things. Because I remember when I looked at whatever was auto created, it was sort of confusing what was what.
Have a look at the Verde docs that I sent around. So those use NumPy styled, which I think is much easier to understand what on earth is going on than the standard Sphinx.
Yeah, I know there's a few different kind of packages you can do to auto-generate those.
Yeah, yeah. So have a look at the Verde docs, because I think that's what we're going after.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Cool. Anything else?
No.
On my end.
That's all for me.
All right. Well, good to see everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Good to see you two again.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Oh, the last thing that I wanted to follow up on, do we want to stick with 2 p.m.? Is this better for people than 10 a.m.?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, better for me.
Okay. Then let's plan for Tuesdays at 2 p.m.
I will
Perfect.
see you guys in 7 weeks.
All right. Have a good trip, Devin. Have fun. All right. See you guys later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.